Hey guys, this is Vince Miller. I'm excited you're joining us today. Today we're in chapter 3 of our study through the book of James, and I really believe James has some excellent content for men. It's very practical, pragmatic, and I would call it masculine. Today's topic is how to move from being a foolish to a wise man. Now, before we dig in, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button below right now so that you can get notified when new videos come out in this series, and you're going to want to get informed so that you don't miss out. Also, head over to the website today. That's beresolute.org, beresolute.org, and do two things for me while you're there. First, sign up for the Men's Daily Devotional. I write one every day for guys just like you, and they're always short, sweet, and to the point. In fact, right now I am journeying through the book of James itself, so you can listen to these videos and then follow along in your reading with me. Second, while you're over there, pick up some all-in gear like I'm sporting right now, right? Support the mission and the message that I live for here, which is to live all in for Him who lived all in for us. So grab a shirt, grab a hat, sport it, share it with others. And if you want, snap a pic, share it with me over on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you socially gather. I would greatly appreciate that. And with that, let's dive into the Bible today. Grab it right now, turn to James chapter 3, and let's discover together how to move from being a foolish man to a wise man. Now, I cannot tell you how many times I have said something that I have, regretted. Seriously, there have been numerous, if not hundreds of times in my life that I've said something I wish actually would have stayed in my head and never came out my mouth. If you want evidence of this, you can just ask my wife if you need a witness to my own verbal stupidity. But, fellas, eventually every man puts his proverbial foot in his mouth. And this happens a lot in moments where we fail to maybe filter out sensitive information, or we fail to get control of our emotions before we say something, or we fail to realize that what we might be saying is offensive to others, or we just fail to get more information before offering our God-delivered opinion, right? But there's something even more tragic about the impact of our words than just the embarrassment of putting our foot in our mouth. Mainly how our words impact another person spiritually and thus impair that person's ability to see and hear and to know the message of Jesus Christ. And it's this that James is concerned about in chapter 3. In fact, as we dig into this issue, we're going to discover the power that we have as men with the words that we speak. James is going to show us that what we say and do has a real impact on people, that it exposes our character, and even more, it impacts our identity and others as men. Thus, what we say makes us either look foolish or wise. Now, first, James addresses, the foolish things that we say that make us look foolish. And he lays blame to a single body part, the tongue. It's a small but powerful muscle of the mouth used for tasting, licking, and swallowing. I actually had to look that up. Yet, here's the difference. In humans, the tongue has a unique power that goes way beyond licking and tasting and swallowing. It's the primary muscle used for articulating speech, and therefore is a necessary tool for communicating, teaching, leading, directing, and guiding. Therefore, with the tongues that we are given, we possess a great power. Power similar to that of a rudder on a ship driven by a powerful wind. Here's how James describes it. He says this: "Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things." But fellas, this is not some new idea, right? We all know that the tongue has this kind of influential power based on the influence of teachers and coaches and politicians and athletes. The tongue possesses immense power to guide a great many people in a direction toward God or away from Him, thus toward foolishness or toward wisdom. But here's a really good question that we need to ask. Is the tongue really to blame? I mean, is it to blame? And the answer, of course, is yes and no. It's actually the person who uses the tongue who bears ultimate blame. And even more accurately, the tongue is simply a tool that does the biddings of the desires and the thoughts and the words that come from a man. And as a result, the tongue can be used to do great good or great evil. And James makes this exact claim. He says, from the mouth, the same mouth, come blessing and cursing. Now, we have all experienced this, right? There's not a person alive who has not been eviscerated by the words of another human being. Just take Tom Cruise and his recent rant captured on audio. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard that by now, but he's just eviscerating his film crew on audio and coming at them with some extremely strong language. And I got to tell you, this never feels good, even when justified, right? At the same time, we have all been moved by the kind and encouraging words of someone, well, we love, by a simple, loving, soft-spoken, and kind word. But James takes this all a bit further. He emphasizes the point and the impact by recognizing the potential downside to the inappropriate use of the tongue. It's that the tongue can be weaponized. And James alluded to this at the beginning of the chapter. Here's what he said. He said, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. His point being is that the role of a teacher carries with it a special responsibility and thus a stricter judgment. But again, this is also nothing new, right? People who teach have the ability to actually shape the future. And sometimes they shape it intentionally in their direction. Some manipulate the truth ever so carefully to favor their ideas and opinions and worldviews and perspectives, and thus they possess the power to influence the minds of unsuspecting people. And we all understand this today, in this year, more than any other year. True? Exactly. There have been some very charismatic voices over time that have led people down unfortunate paths. Take 20th century leaders like Adolf Hitler or Saddam Hussein or Kim Jong-un or Joseph Stalin. Each of these men have used their voice to influence millions and guide unsuspecting people toward devastation. And these men will be judged for how they have influenced people. And as James says, their judgment will be stricter, right? And this is true of any teacher, any leader, and any president. Yet, fellas, let's be honest. Guys like you and me possess the same power they do. Just because we don't lead millions of people doesn't mean we don't possess the same power. By God's design, we are given a tongue to influence others in our roles as men, husbands, fathers, and leaders. We're called to teach and even exercise power with our tongues. If you recall, God gave us some creative power at the beginning of time. Power to define and name things. Here's how Genesis chapter 2, verse 20 reads. The man gave names to all the livestock and to the birds of the heavens, and to every beast of the field. Do you see what God did here? God gave us our tongues and allows us to use the freedom with them to create and to define things within His divine order. This is a unique and special power that we are called to steward with care. And we're commanded to use this power and responsibility in a godly way. And now more than ever in our country and world, we need God-honoring men to speak up and to stand up and to use their tongues to do good rather than to do evil and harm. Don't you think we've had enough of that in the world? And in the roles where you lead, you need to be a counterforce for good that speaks not foolishness, but with wisdom. And thus, James sets us up to discover how to speak what is right and righteous by pursuing God's wisdom. Second, in this chapter, we discover the real issue with the tongue. It's the heart itself. You see, the problem is not only what our tongues say. It's not merely the muscle of the mouth articulating a variety of words that we kind of put into sentences, right? But it's more. Our problem with our tongues is a problem of the human heart. Here is how James lays it out. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth." And here we finally get to the core of the issue. It's a heart driven by jealousy and selfishness. You see, fellas, we have a devious heart that wants to possess and becomes self-destructive, and we can get pretty passionate about possession and self-destruction, right? Thus, our emotions direct us to say and do some unfortunate and foolish things. But the secret in this verse lies in what guides our tongue. Do we let emotions determine the movement of our tongue, or do we let the truth determine the movement of our tongue? If it's emotions, then our tongues become unstable and selfish. If it's the truth of God, then we're understanding and stable and wise men who conduct ourselves rightly. And here's the game changer. James takes this one step further. He shows us how to gain wisdom. And honestly, it's awesome. If not the single greatest verse in this chapter, it's verse 17. He says, "But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere." Now, this is remarkable insight. It's full of wisdom for the man of God. James is aware that true wisdom only comes from above, and the wise man does 6 things. He's open to conversation and reason. He handles each situation peacefully. His judgments are never impartial. He uses power mercifully. His actions exhibit good fruit, and he does all this from a pure and sincere heart. Now that's a wise man. This is what wise men do. So what's our actionable for this week? Well, there are a couple of potential actionables here. First, if you find yourself using your tongue in foolish ways, then start by stopping those behaviors. Start by stopping those behaviors, fellas. Start by choosing not to make those statements or use those phrases and words that got you in a bad habit of saying things that you shouldn't. You fellas know what words and phrases and statements you're making and using that are hurting other people. Just choose to stop saying those things. Go all in and remove them all out from your words and from your language, right? For example, if cursing is a problem, stop cursing. If sarcasm is a problem for you, stop saying sarcastic things. If an emotion like anger is a problem, then stop opening your mouth when you're angry. It's pretty simple, fellas, but it needs to be said. Second, there is also a proactive step we can take to start being wiser men. You see, it's not always enough to just merely stop negative behaviors. It's good to also have that positive counter response, to start positive and godly ones as well. And I think James has a pretty good checklist for us on how to become wiser men who say wiser things. His list of 6 is really strong. Be open to conversation and reason. Handle situations peacefully. Be impartial in judgments. Use power mercifully. Exhibit good fruit, and do it all from a pure and sincere heart. And you could easily choose one thing from this list and replace that one bad behavior with a positive one that will guide you toward wisdom and using your tongue with wisdom. But don't miss this. This is super important. We are not merely list switching here, switching from a list of bad behaviors to a list of good ones, right? No, we're not doing that. We are using our tongue and thus behaviors to rein in our hearts that need to come underneath the lordship of Jesus Christ. Let's go back to the very beginning of this chapter. In chapter 3, in one of the very first verses, James says this. He says, if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. His point being this: when we put a bit in the mouth of a horse, we're doing it to guide it. And that's what we're trying to do here with a behavior change. We are putting a bit in our mouth or on our tongue, not merely to rein in our tongue or our behaviors, but actually to rein in our heart so that we can change what we say. We are turning our desires, and thus our whole lives are being bridled by this tiny little muscle and a behavior change. That's it. That's how we get there, right? We bring about a heart change by bringing about a behavior change in hopes of permanently turning our heart towards something more honoring so that our mouths will speak nothing but truth. Thus, you and me become wise men. So now, fellas, let's get out there today. Do something with this message and live all in for Him who lived all in for you. And guys, share this post, and I'll see you right back here next week. Till then, be, live, and act resolute.